Hey, home church, school is officially out, so you get the summer version of the pastor from now on until the middle of August. Let's jump in to another week of our sermon series that we're on right now called Love Paul. We're going through the book of 1 Timothy first. In the last few weeks, we've looked at a couple of different chapters. Chapter 3, where Paul talks to Timothy about the overseers or the pastors, the deacons, the board members, and their wives. Chapter 4, he gives some practical living advice to Timothy. But in chapter 5, he starts talking to Timothy about how we should treat people within the church. And he tells us this is how you should treat people. And he uses a couple of chapters to instruct Timothy exactly on how we should treat each other. Now, this is a little sad. It's a little sad that Paul felt the need to write to Timothy and say, hey, Timothy, within the church, this is how people should treat each other. But if Paul felt like it needed to be written, then there must have been a reason. People must not have been treating each other right. And so let's jump into what he's talking about. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters, with absolute purity." Now, if we look at this, Paul is telling us, treat one another like family. And look at the words that he uses here. Father, brothers, mothers, sisters. All words that are used to describe our family, our biological family. But Paul is saying, hey, listen, you have a family here too. This is the family of Christ, and you should treat each other like family. Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but treat him as if he was your own dad. Hey, listen, treat these younger guys as if they were your brothers. Treat the older women in the church just like you would treat your mom. And these younger women, look out for them like they're sisters. Treat them with absolute purity, but treat each other like family. Then in 3 through 16, this is a major portion of this chapter. 14 verses of the 25 verses of this chapter, Paul uses to instruct Timothy on how to take care of the widows of the church. And this is an absolute requirement for us as the church, even today, to take care of people who need help. And the widows of the church were who Paul was talking about here. And Paul says, hey, first of all, their family should take care of them. If they have kids and grandkids, let them take care of them and put their religion into works. Let's see them do that. But if they don't, Paul gives some guidance. He says, here's who you should put on the list. Are they over 60? Okay, put them on the list. If they're faithful to their husband. If she has been faithful to her husband and she's over 60 years old and she's well known for good deeds, like being hospitable, like washing the saints' feet, if she's known for those good deeds, put her on the list. Then in 17 through 21, Paul says, the elders who direct the affairs of the church are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. For Scripture says, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain, and the worker deserves his wages. Do not entertain an accusation against an elder unless it is brought by 2 or 3 witnesses. So Paul says, Timothy, honor the elders, especially if they're preaching or teaching. And he's like, hey, don't listen to people. If one person comes to you and says something, hey, don't put a lot of stock into it. Now, if 2 or 3 people come to you, that's something you might want to listen about. Honor the elders. And then we have that little word, but. Honor the elders, especially those preaching and teaching. But those elders who are sinning, you are to reprove before everyone, so that the others may take warning. This is one of the harsh realities of being in leadership. If you're going to say, I want to be in leadership in the church, you got to be okay with this, where if you do something wrong, somebody's going to call you out on it. And Paul is telling Timothy, hey, those people, those elders in your church, if they're sinning, you call them out, but you call them out before everyone so that everyone can take warning, that everyone will see, hey, this is something you don't want to do. And then he goes on even further. He says, hey, honor the elders, especially if they're preaching and teach them, but correct them if they're sinning and reprove them. Reprove them. And this means to correct someone for a misdeed, typically in a gentle but formal manner. This word gentle is sometimes where we fall short. We want to reprove somebody, but we want to do it quickly and harshly. And Paul says, hey, reprove them, and that means do it in a gentle but formal manner. And that's fine to reprove them, but then he says, I charge you in the sight of God and in Christ Jesus and the elect angels to keep these instructions without partiality and do nothing out of favoritism. So Timothy, hey, honor the elders, especially if they're preaching and teaching, but correct them if they're sinning, but keep it even. Don't show favoritism. If it's not okay for this leader, it's not okay for this leader. We don't have different standards for different people because God doesn't have different standards for different people. God does not show favoritism. Why should we? And this is what Paul is telling Timothy. Hey, you reprove them if they're sinning, but don't look at that and be like, oh, well, this guy, man, he does a lot for the church. I'm just going to kind of go take him off to the side and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Oh, but this guy, I'm going to bring him up in front of everybody and point out his sins. Paul says, no, don't do that. Keep it even. Don't show favoritism. 1 Timothy 5:22 says, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, and do not share in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. Paul is telling you here, don't be in a rush to put people into leadership. And, Timothy, don't be a follower. The laying on of hands, and it says don't be hasty in doing that. Don't be too hasty. Laying on of hands is what they did when they installed new leaders, right? Or it was a blessing or a time of prayer for somebody. And he's like, hey, don't be in a rush to put people into leadership. Oh, and don't share in the sins of others. Timothy, don't be a follower. Don't worry about what people around you are doing because the crowd is usually not right. If you find yourself going in a different direction as the crowd, you could probably pat yourself on the back because the crowd is usually going in the wrong direction. Remember, it was the crowd that shouted, crucify him. In 23, it says, stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. Now, there's a key word in this verse. Stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. There's also a key word here of wine. It doesn't say use a little scotch or use a little bourbon or use a little, whatever. It says use a little wine because of your stomach. And this verse may get used in arguments more than any other verse in the Bible. And people will say like, well, that's different wine. That was just grape juice. Well, in Ephesians, which was the church that Timothy was leading, Paul reminds them, do not get drunk with wine. So what that tells me is Paul was probably telling Timothy like, hey, a little wine is okay for you. A little wine for your stomach's sake, for your illnesses, that's okay. But don't get drunk on it. Don't take it too far. In 24 and 25, Paul tells Timothy, the sins of some are obvious, reaching the place of judgment ahead of them. He's saying these people are so bad, their sins are reaching judgment before they do. And the sins of others trail behind them. Hey, you may not even know it until that person's gone. In the same way, good deeds are obvious, and even those that are not obvious cannot remain hidden forever. I'll tell you the way I kind of look at this. Last weekend, I was out working in the yard, and I picked up a piece of sheet metal, and there was a snake. And I yelled at Christina, and I said, hey, I need a gun. And she was up on the deck of the pool, and she looked back, and she said, what? And I said, I need a gun. And she said, what is it? I said, it's a snake. And I'm expecting her to run and get a gun at this point. And then she says, well, what kind is it? I said, I don't know. It's a snake and I need a gun. And she says, well, how big is it? I don't know. Just give me a gun. Right? There was a snake in the grass. And by the time she got back to where I was, the snake was gone. And the whole time I was working in the yard from that point on, I kept thinking to myself, somewhere in this grass, there's a snake. I think Paul was telling Timothy, hey, Timothy, in church, there could be a snake in the grass. There's some people that their deeds, you're not really going to figure it out until it trails behind them. They're already long gone, and then the destruction follows them, and they leave it in their path. But Timothy, just like that, there's people sitting in the church that are doing things that one of these days that person's going to be gone, and that thing's not going to be getting done, and you're going to be like, wow. Who took care of that? Who served by taking care of this? And we're not even going to know it until they're gone. And there's people like that in church too, but I think Paul is telling Timothy, hey, pay attention to the people around you because there could be a snake in the grass. But also, pay attention to the people who are doing the good things around you. Paul's telling Timothy, pay attention to what people around you are doing. Watch who you surround yourself with. And he says some things are obvious, but some things take a second to come to light. I think that if Paul was writing this today, he would say to Timothy and to the church of 2026, take care of one another. Treat each other like family. Hey, honor the elders, but call them out if they're sinning, and don't play favorites. Pay attention to what people around you are after, because they may not be after God, and it may not be that obvious until they're long gone. Hey, we hope to see you back here on campus soon. We hope if you can't make it back with us, that you have a safe summer and you keep up with what we're doing here at Home Church with our online series. We've got one more week in 1 Timothy, and then we'll be moving on. So join us if you can, but if not, keep up with what we're doing online. We love you. Have a great day.